Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jeremy Leffler, and I work in the policy office at the National Science Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to another session of the NSF Virtual Grants Conference. And I'm now pleased to present this session, which will cover award management requirements. And this session will be presented by Liz DeHart, Vanessa Richardson, and Jeff Vieceli.
Greetings and welcome to the Spring 2023 NSF Virtual Grants Conference. And my presentation is going to be on award management. The speakers today will be Liz DeHart. She's a grant and contract cost analyst in the Division of Institution and Award Support in the Office of Budget, Finance, and Award Management. My name is Vanessa Richardson. I'm a team lead in the Division of Grants and Agreements and the Office of Budget, Finance, and Award Management as well. And our last expert is Jeff Vieceli. He's the head of the Systems Office in the Division of Institution and Award Support, also in the Office of Budget, Finance, and Award Management. Next slide. The topics covered today will include award process, award processing delays, post-award notifications and requests, no-cost extensions, award transfers, and the DOS portion will be on the cost analysis and award oversight process. The last portion is going to be awardee responsibilities and the keys to success. Our motto in DGA is ask early, ask often. Next slide. Our mission statement for DGA is to support the issuance of NSF assistance awards and other agreements by providing business, financial, and award administration assistance from pre-award through closeout. With DOS, our sister division, they provide sustained excellence and stewardship across the awards grants life cycle through state-of-the-art business practices and exemplary business assistance to key stakeholders within NSF and across the research community. Their mission is to demonstrate organizational excellence, agility, and innovation, and ensuring NSF leadership within the federal R&D enterprise. Next slide. The NSF award process overview is as follows. The first portion is proposal for preparation and submission. The next section includes a program review, which is a very important part of the process. Once your award is reviewed, there is a decision to either recommend or decline. So you will get a recommendation letter or a declination letter. Then after the recommendation, it is submitted to the Division of Grants and Agreements for review. And these are the various three branches that we have. Whatever proposal your science is presented to, these are the branches who will review your proposal. After that, we look at it and we say, we are going to award it, yes, or either no. And so you'll get a declination letter, and if it's yes, you get grants officer approval, and you will receive an award notice, which would be good news. Next slide, please. What kind of awards are issued by DGA? These are assistance awards, the principal purpose of which is to transfer anything of value from NSF to the grantee for them to carry out a public purpose, and not to acquire property or services for NSF's direct benefit or use. We issue grants, which are standard grants and continuing grants. The standard grants have all of the time put up front and all of the funding is provided up front. The continuing grants are done incrementally, which means that every year you will get a set amount according to your budget. We also issue cooperative agreements. Cooperative agreements are designed to be to have the NSF program officer and the grantee and the principal investigator in a substantial involvement relationship. We also provide fellowships, which are individual awards to complete science for a doctorate, dissertation, and other types of activities within the grants field. Next slide, please. DGA typically approves 12,000 new awards and 5,000 supplements, continuing grant increments, or 5,000 non-funded actions. Next slide. Award requirements. Award terms and conditions. Terms and conditions are identified in the award notice. For questions about an award that you have received, reach out to the Grants and Agreements officer who issued the award. Their information will be in the award notice. Next slide, please. Common reasons for delays in award processing. Some of the reasons include, the most common is the overdue project report. These reports are due annually, or a final report is due at the end of the award period, when you're finished and totally completed all of your work. When you're, some of the other reasons are when you're not following the requirements of the solicitation, which may require additional information or certifications. The next most common reason is if you're missing an institutional review board for human service or the institutional animal care and use committee, which are animal certifications. And your program officer can help you, guide you through that process. Or if you have unallowable or unjustified budget items. Next, you will hear from Jeff Vieceli on technical reporting requirements. Thank you.
I am Jeff Vieceli. I'm the head of the Systems Office in the Division of Institution and Award Support. My team and I are responsible for the NSF's awards management system, as well as the NSF's institution system. We work very closely with the Policy Office, as well as the Division of Grants and Agreements. We also work with the programmers to ensure that our systems support policy. So I am at an intersection of policy, process, procedure, and systems. So I kind of know a little bit about a lot of different things. And that's why I'm here to talk to you today and talk about project reports and some of the other things that are on the agenda. Let's talk about project reports. Project reports are covered in the Proposal and Award Policy and Procedures Guide. It tells you, again, that they're basically annual project reports, a final annual project report, as well as a public outcomes or project outcomes report. I will say in the most recent PAP guide, we did take the opportunity to clarify that it is a final annual report. So there had been some confusion about that. For years, people would provide a cumulative report. It's not really cumulative. It is the final annual report. So it just covers that annual period. Project reports are part of the terms and conditions of the award. NSF is currently clarifying the due and overdue dates. There's a working group working on that. Annual project reports are due, if you read the policy, they're due at least 90 days prior to the end of the budget period. Final project reports are due 120 days after the end date of the award. And the public outcomes or project outcomes reports are also due by 120 days after the end of the award. Overdue project reports. As you heard Vanessa talking about, one of the things that will delay your award is overdue project reports. You don't want overdue project reports. They block many different things. They block the approvals on the subject award as well as any associated awards. So there's a spider web effect. It affects not only that award, but other awards and other co-PIs or PIs. You cannot get funding. You cannot get other administrative actions. Also, when you submit the reports, the final project report or the project outcomes report, it is an indication that that is your sign that you've completed the entire scope of the project. So if you're supplying that final project report or that POR, there should be no further work taking place after that report is submitted. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. I've already covered some of this information, but again, one of the things that is very important about this slide are the consequences if it goes overdue. Again, we're blocking those funding actions. We're blocking no-cost extensions. If it gets really bad at the end of the project, we can actually report you to FAPIIS, which is the Federal Awardee Performance and Integrity Information System. FAPIIS is not something that you want to be listed on. It is a bad thing. It's a publicly facing website that basically says that you've not complied with the terms and conditions of a federal grant. And in theory, it could affect you receiving any new grants. And it is reported by the awardee organization. A couple other things that should be noted: the public or project outcomes report is published by NSF verbatim. It's not actually approved by the program officer. It is put up, it is in the words of the PI. All we do is post it. We do have reminder notices that get sent out when the reports are due or overdue. But in theory, when we send out that first notice, especially for the annual project reports, that the report is due, if you really look at the policy, it's overdue. Because we start sending out those notices at 90 days. And remember, the policy says that they're due at least 90 days prior to. So when we send out that first reminder notice 90 days prior to the end of the budget period, you're already basically late, although we're giving you that 90-day grace period to get the reports in. There is a dashboard for the PIs, the co-PIs, and the SRO to go out and look at any of those report requirements. PIs and co-PIs can submit. The SRO cannot. The best practice that NSF recommends is that the SRO should assign someone to track those report requirements and should be following up with the PI to make sure that they're on track with supplying those reports. And the last thing, the most important thing, is if you are going to be delayed or if there are issues, as soon as you know that you will be delayed or that there will be issues, reach out to your program officer. FAPIIS, I've already mentioned a little bit about FAPIIS, but again, FAPIIS is something that's fairly new. It came in as part of the uniform guidance that was put into effect in August of 2020. It basically states that if an award after 1 year of its end date still has any outstanding project reports, that NSF must report that award to the Federal Awardee Performance Integrity Information System, FAPIIS. It's not a good thing. You want to avoid being reported to FAPIIS at all costs. So the SROs, the PIs, co-PIs, you should all be contacting NSF and working out and getting those project reports submitted. Again, project reports are something that you do not want to have go overdue, and you certainly don't want them to be overdue 1 year after the end of date of the award. NSF takes reporting very seriously. Again, there are a lot of bad things that happen if they're overdue. And again, as a best practice, NSF would recommend that the SRO track those reports. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please.
Thank you. The next section that we will discuss are proposal budgets. Budget line F, participant support costs, is a problem area in many ways. You should know the definition of participant support and be aware of NSF's policy with respect to participant support, and watch out for unallowable entertainment and indirect costs. The other line items that we generally have some difficulty reviewing are budget line G, other direct costs. Subawards. Be sure that the subrecipient budgets and budget justifications are included as a part of the proposal budget. And the other item is other, which is G6. Please itemize other direct costs clearly in the budget justification and be aware of unallowable costs. Next slide. Budget line I, indirect costs. Please continue to charge in accordance with your most recent federally negotiated rate agreement. In most cases, a supplement would use the same rate that was used at the original award submission. Also, the budget justification should be no more than 5 pages. The amounts of each budget line item requested must be documented and justified. Amounts budgeted must be consistent with proposing organizations, established written policies and procedures, and a cost accounting practices used in accumulating and reporting costs. Next slide. Conference proposals and participant support costs. These are very specific definitions of budget line items, and all of the costs must be allowable. When you are adding a subaward for subrecipient monitoring, the request must be submitted through research.gov. Each sub-award must have an UEI and be registered in research.gov and SAM. The monitoring requirements are outlined in 2 CFR 200. Then award closeout and mandatory cost share requirements. Most NSF awards are automatically closed. However, if there are special terms and conditions in the award that need requirements fulfilled, reports submitted, and manual closeout, then DGA will reach out to the grantee to ensure that all of these items are submitted in our system before we close it out. Next slide. There are various recipient notifications that are submitted to NSF. These include the grantee approved no-cost extension, which is the grantee's first no-cost extension that is approved by the grantee. There are also items such as significant changes in methods or procedures. These are submitted directly to the program officer for their approval, and these are other than changes in objective or scope. There are also significant changes, delays, or events of unusual interest, and this is still other than changes in objective or scope, which are reviewed both by the program officer, and you will receive an award notice, and the annual and final cost share notifications. Next slide. Conflicts of interest that cannot be satisfactorily managed, reduced, or eliminated, and research that proceeds without the imposition of conditions or restricts when a conflict of interest exists. Finding determination of the PI or co-PI have been found to have violated awardee policies or codes of conduct, statutes, regulations, or executive orders related to sexual harassment or other forms of harassment or sexual assault. Placement by the recipient of a PI or co-PI on administrative leave, or the imposition of any administrative action on the PI or any co-PI by the awardee relating to any finding or determination or an investigation of an alleged violation of awardee policies or codes of conduct, statutes, regulations, executive orders related to sexual harassment and other forms of harassment or sexual assault. These are notifications that are usually submitted by your SRO. Next slide. Others are changes in objective or scope or methods or procedures. This is a very important notification to your program officer that you are venturing off the original scope of the project. When you have a change in PI or co-PI or person months are devoted to the project, these are notifications that are submitted on your behalf to the NSF for approval. The second NSF no-cost extension it can be approved after review by the program officer or the Division of Grants and Agreements. The next one is a very important one, is transfers of funds from participant support to other categories of expense. That is a direct approval by the program officer, and they will review these costs and ensure that they're not going off of scope, and they are okay with you kind of changing these costs from that category to another non-participant support category. And as discussed earlier, the subawarding or transferring part of the NSF award, which is a subaward, is for you to enter into a new subrecipient agreement. And our post-award additions of postdoctoral scholars, that is another notification that will probably require a mentoring plan. And for a full list, see the research terms and conditions, Appendix A, the prior approval matrix, which will help you determine if you need to submit any type of notification request or just reach out to your program officer. So this particular approval matrix will help you with that. Again, I will pass the next section of discussion over to Jeff Vieceli. Thank you.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about no-cost extensions. Some of the highlights of no-cost extensions: you can't ask for a no-cost extension if there's a zero balance on the award. Basically, if there's a zero balance on the award, you don't have an award anymore. You spent out all those funds. So the no-cost extension really doesn't do anything for you. I know a lot of people think we get requests to have a no-cost extension because they want an extension to file their final project report. Well, the NSF isn't like the IRS. An extension does not give you additional time to supply that final project report. In fact, what it actually does is it changes that final project report. It becomes an annual report, and we insert a new final report. So you've actually added a report requirement to your award. So the no-cost extension isn't meant to give you more time to file a report. Again, if you need more time to file the report or you're having issues, reach out and contact your program officer. The other thing about no-cost extensions that's very important is it is not about having funds left on the award. We get lots of requests where PIs or the SROs say, we want to extend this award because there's funding left. It's not about the funding. The uniform guidance and NSF terms and conditions are clear on this. Funds alone are not the reason for a no-cost extension. It has to do with the scope. You've not completed the scope of the award, whether it be from the original proposal or any approvals of scope changes. So again, it's not about the funding, it's about the scope. There are deadlines to submit. Grantee approved no-cost extensions must be submitted at least 10 days prior to the end date of the award. But you don't really have to worry about those timelines too much because research.gov already has that programmed in, that research.gov will automatically select the correct version of the no-cost extension that you need. The other thing that I would say as a best practice is always validate the award end date once you believe you've submitted and had an approved no-cost extension, because we do sometimes have some system issues or things sometimes get changed or lost. We have PIs who forward things to their SRO and the SRO never actually submits them to the NSF. So the PI believes that they've gotten a no-cost extension where in fact, they've not actually received that no-cost extension. So again, if you're requesting that no-cost extension, always verify that that end date has changed. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about canceling appropriations. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because, again, this is something that's already programmed into the NSF systems. But as some highlights, when NSF makes an award, those funds are not good forever. So you can't just keep getting no-cost extension after no-cost extension after no-cost extension. Those funds actually will cancel and will eventually have to go back to the Treasury. In most cases, those funds are good for 6 years. And I know we get lots of questions about how can we tell how long the appropriation is good for, when does my cancel or when do my funds cancel? And again, generally you don't have to worry about that because we don't have a lot of awards that end up having this issue. So the only thing that you really need to know is that you should be spending out on a fairly regular basis and making progress on your award and your spend out. We do have alert messages that are built into research.gov that let people know that things are happening. Our Division of Financial Management will actually send out notices at the beginning of the fiscal year, letting the SRO know that funds may be expiring or lapsing on awards coming up, and they provide that list and tell you what basically you need to do. I will say that NSF does not control this process. This is basically appropriations law. And at the end of the funding period, that 6-year period, Treasury automatically takes those funds back. So NSF does not control this. And basically the takeaway here is contact your grants officer, contact the program officer, contact your accountant, your financial accountant and DFM, draw down your funds when you need to. And the last thing that I will mention here is that unfortunately what ends up happening is the funds lapse on the last day of the fiscal year. And as most of you who work in the financial arena know, NSF's Award Cash Management Service closes down usually around September 23rd or 24th. So you must have your drawdowns in before we close down ACMS, so that you can make sure that you get those funds. There is, as I mentioned, on research.gov, a banner and a warning about the canceling appropriations. When the financial folks go in and actually try to draw down funds, or whenever you're trying to do a no-cost extension, it will tell you that there are funds that are about to cancel. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. PI transfers or award transfers. NSF generally talks about PI transfers, but again, it really truly is an award transfer. It's a mechanism to get an award from one organization to a new organization. A couple highlights on this slide. Again, the award is made to the organization and not the PI. So the organization makes the decision about whether or not they wish to transfer the award to, if the PI moves from one organization to a new organization, the original awardee organization makes a determination of whether or not they want the PI to take that award with them. It is their award, not the PI's. So that they can, if they wish, they can either transfer the award, they can actually appoint a new PI at their organization to take over the award. They can also do a subaward arrangement with the new awardee organization where the PI will be. And the last thing that they can do, but we see it very seldom, is that they could actually just end the award and terminate it and not do anything with it. If you are having issues or questions about PI transfers, please contact your grants officer and or your program officer, again, as soon as possible. We do get requests for grant transfers that, oh, the PI transferred from this organization to a new organization a year ago. We really should have known about that, and the grant should have been transferred well before that. So again, reach out to a program officer and grants officer. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. A couple things about PI transfers that you should remember: that the career awards don't have the option to appoint a new PI or to do a subaward. So again, they either need to be transferred or be ended. And that is because of the nature of the career award. It's made to a specific individual, so you can't just appoint a new person to it. Another thing to remember for the established program to stimulate competitive research, EPSCoR funds. EPSCoR funds cannot transfer from an EPSCoR state to a non-EPSCoR state. So you couldn't go, you couldn't be in an EPSCoR state, have EPSCoR funds attached to your award, and then transfer to California and take those EPSCoR funds with you. California is not an EPSCoR state, so we can't transfer. So we actually have to reduce the award by that amount of EPSCoR funding. There are some things that we can do. And again, I would tell you to reach out to your program officer and your grants officer if you have EPSCoR funds attached to your award and you're transferring to a non-EPSCoR state. Another best practice is to reconcile before you come in for the transfer request. So the original awardee organization should not just look at their drawdowns and the obligations to date on the award. They should also make sure that there aren't any pending expenses that have not been drawn down, such as current month payroll, unpaid subaward invoices, unpaid invoices for equipment, unpaid invoices for travel. So again, all of that should be taken into account and reconciled before you put in for that PI transfer. Because once the award is transferred from organization A to organization B, there is no way to do a second transfer. So if we transfer too much money or too little money, NSF does not really have a mechanism to deal with either one of those situations. And we will actually tell you that this was an agreement between the two awardee organizations, and they need to figure it out somehow. And the last and very important thing, and I've already kind of mentioned this, is start early with your PI transfers. Like I said, we get requests that the PI moved over a year ago or a year ago. That's really not long, or that's really too long for those awards to be sitting and be in some sort of a limbo. Because if the PI has transferred to the new organization, any expenses that have been incurred under that award at the old awardee would technically not really be eligible for reimbursement. So again, make sure that those are timely. And now I believe Liz is going to speak next, so I will hand it off to Liz.
Thanks, Jeff. So I'm going to talk about my division, the Division of Institution and Award Support. We have two sister teams within the division, the CAP team and the RAM team. CAP deals primarily with pre-award activities and RAM post-award activities. So we look at programmatic site visits. We do desk reviews through a contractor. Many of you may have had those before. We do site visits, both virtual and in person. We do some post-award financial monitoring with the assistance of the Division of Financial Management. And we resolve Inspector General, IG audits, and also single audits. Okay, so let's jump into unallowable costs. Let's just cut right to it. The simple definition, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's costs that you may buy, your organization may purchase, but are not allowed to be charged to your federal award. The biggest one that we see is alcohol and some of the food costs. So this can both delay a budget proposal with approval if you have an award that you're working on, and it can also result in disallowed costs at the end of your award or during your award. So these are some guidance regulations you all should follow: the uniform guidance, the FAR, depending on your type of organization, the PAP guide always, that's NSF's baby, as I'm sure you've heard a lot here today, and then the FTR. And again, depending on the type of organization you follow or you will follow one of, some of these a little differently. Proposed versus actual compensation is one we see a lot. So if during your reporting period, if during your financial period, you are working on proposed effort report time commitments, but then you get to the end of that effort report, you get to the end of that pay period, whatever it may be, and the time looks a little different, the amount charged looks a little different, please adjust those accordingly. We cannot, as you can imagine, we cannot take proposed costs as an allowable cost. It has to be based on actual effort reports, actual amounts paid. The next one, the application of fringe and indirect rates. Please make sure your indirect and fringe rates are in order. We're seeing a lot of these in IG audits these days. Indirect cost rates. If you have an indirect agreement that fluctuates over the life of your award, please make sure you're adjusting it appropriately. Down especially, but up, please make sure you're checking to see where that lands. If you're an IHE who has the rate for the entire period of the award, please make sure you're keeping track of those as well. Unreasonable travel costs, please keep these in mind. The GSA has hotel rates, per diem rates, personal travel costs, all of the flight requirements. Please make sure you're keeping these in mind and checking these and documenting that you're checking them. Meals charged to awards for employees. Employees are only allowed to charge food costs or per diem while they're on travel. We do not pay for food for employees in any other circumstance. Participant support costs are adequately documented. Please make sure in everything, but especially participant support. Participant support is a huge one for NSF, and it is a very high-risk category. Please make sure anything you charge to participant support is well documented. If you are buying something for a group, make sure you take attendance of who is in that group and that they are in your participant support pool. So some things we've seen, field trips to the baseball park, movie theaters. If you are doing an activity to get kids excited about science, we think that's great. Please make sure it's well documented and well justified that they are doing these kinds of things. We are not just going to pay for movie tickets to go see whatever's out these days. T-shirts and tote bags, we do not pay for merchandise, basically, to promotional material. There are circumstances where these things are allowable, but please make sure you talk to your program officer and the grants officer before you charge these to the award, because they are probably one of the most frequently disallowed costs we see. So how do we determine whether something's unallowable or allowable? There are three big rules in the uniform guidance that we obviously follow. Allowable, alcohol is a big one that gets kicked out all the time. We will not pay for happy hours or cocktail hours or anything like that, almost ever. So costs must be allowable generally based on the uniform guidance, based on the PAP guide, all these other things. They must be reasonable. Even if we will pay for flights for people to travel, we will pay for a reasonable flight, not the unreasonable ones where you get fancy things in the front of the plane. It must be allocable. So we are seeing this one a lot as well. If you buy a piece of equipment for an award, but it looks like you're using it on 4 other awards and to teach a class, and someone's using it for their personal use, NSF should not be paying for the entirety of that piece of equipment. So please make sure that if you're charging something 100% to the award and it looks like it's in a public space, or it looks like it could be used for something else, or the person using it is charged on multiple awards, please make sure that you're documenting why it's split and how it's split. And if the organization you are working with has a methodology to determine that allocation, because it's really important that if you say, oh, we decided 50-50, but that's not their time split, that's not the time split used for the machine, then it's going to be an issue. Treated consistently is the next one. Indirect versus direct is one that we see. It must be treated consistently across funding sources. So that means if you have, for example, a mileage rate for the state that's lower than the federally allowed rate for mileage, you cannot charge the federal government more than you charge the state. Conformance. So it has to align with all of these laws, regulations, policies. That one should be clear. Adequately documented. I cannot say this one enough. If you have a question, send it over email. If you didn't do something in writing, it doesn't count in the federal government. It did not happen. Please make sure you have invoices, you have emails requesting permission, you have everything you can document it. So these are 2 columns of some general rules. Costs unallowable in almost every circumstances. Alcohol, we see this one more than I wish we did. We're not paying for networking time, cocktail hours, anything like that. If you're on travel and we're paying for your meal, get a glass of wine on a separate check. Alumni activities, tuition benefits for family members, bad debt, you can see below. Some unallowable costs that are allowable occasionally and with a lot of documentation and prior approval and permission. Advertising costs are unallowable unless they are necessary to meet the requirements of our programs. Public relation costs, same example, if they are necessary, but you have to document and prove that they are necessary. Participant support, prior approval. Again, conference costs, facilities, meals, refreshments, transportation, all of these things that go along with participant support, please make sure they are approved and documented. So, like I've said, prior written approval is so important. Research.gov is your place to go for written approval. You will, for many of these things, you may need to talk to the program officer as well as the grants officer. Please make sure if the program officer tells you, that sounds great. If you are buying something, please talk to the grant officer. As long as it's a change of scope or a change in budget, they don't need to see everything, but the grants officer really needs to sign off on everything. The program officer is not the person to sign off on purchases or changes in your budget. Subawards and changes of PI. These are ones we're seeing a lot as well. If you have a budget, you have an award, it's rolling along, but one of your subawardees or PIs drops out of the project. You found someone else who's great. They may even be better. That's wonderful. Please make sure your program officer and grants officer know so that you can change your budget, you can update your scope, and you can have allowable costs charged to those subawards and PI. If you have a PI who's working at an institution and they get a new job at another institution, that's better, that's great. However, we need to do a new subaward to that new institution. Unsupported expenses by subrecipients. Subrecipients are the responsibility of the prime grantee. If something happens, NSF is not responsible. If they have disallowed costs, the prime awardee, that's you all, are responsible for repaying it. We do not charge the subrecipient. So if your subrecipient does not keep documents, if they are charging proposed cost instead of budget and instead of actuals, it is your responsibility to pay back what is disallowed. One thing I will add is that we have seen a few IG audits where the subawardee's agreement ends a year, 2 years, 3 years before the prime awardee's period of performance end date. That means that document retention requirements for the prime awardee are 7 years past the end of their period of performance. But for the sub-awardee who ended a year, let's call it 2 years earlier, they now have to keep documents for 9 years. The document retention requirement is for the end of the overarching umbrella period of performance. So anything that ends prior to that, please make sure your sub-awardees know they have to keep documentation longer. Okay, we're gonna go through these again really quick. Participant support costs. Even though they may be approved for the award, equipment rental, building spaces, IT services, they cannot be participant support. So I really encourage all of you to make sure that your budgets are clear and as detailed as you can get them at the proposal process, because we will catch some of these things in the proposal and we can tell you ahead of time before you have to move them, before they're disallowed, that this happens. Indirect costs are not allowed to be charged on participant support costs unless it's included in your indirect cost rate agreement, but that's a rarity. And then we really prefer when they're segregated in the accounting system so that we can see, okay, no indirect cost was charged, here's how they're separating it out. Anything that you're buying that looks like incentives, gifts, souvenirs, promotional items, or entertainment costs, they must be justified in the budget. They will be scrutinized very, very closely by an auditor, by the IG, and by us. So please make sure they are in your budget, they are clear as to why it's necessary, it's clear how much money you're going to spend, and it's clear that it's approved is the big one. And if you have questions, please ask them. We would rather you ask than disallow the cost later. So a couple more. Meals and coffee breaks. Like I said earlier, NSF does not pay for food that goes to employees who are not on travel status. So meals, coffee breaks, happy hours, cocktail hours, networking activities. Please do not put food and beverages and alcohol on NSF awards for those. Fringe benefits. This one's tricky. Please make sure you have your fringe benefits in order. We're happy to talk if you're a little worried about that. If you're a PI charging half of your time to an award, we should not be also paying for 50 or 100% of your fringe benefits. They should be allocated appropriately. If you are using a fringe benefit rate, please make sure that someone has looked it over, that you have documented it, and that you are checking it to make sure that that rate is accurate. It can be included in your indirect cost rate, but not necessarily. Entertainment. We have said this one a lot. If anything that looks like entertainment is in your budget, please make sure you have asked, that you have documented it, that you have made sure it's necessary, and that you have justified it in writing. Okay, and now I'll hand it back to Jeff. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. And I will be picking up the rest of the presentation till the end. So the first slide here talks about resources that are available for awardee organizations. Of course, there's the uniform guidance. As Jean Feldman would tell you, that is her Bible. That is what she bases all of the NSF policies and procedures off of, is we must be in compliance with the uniform guidance. It is out there and posted. You can always go and look at that and interpret it yourself, or ask for someone to help you with that. There's also the federal acquisition requisition or regulations, the FAR. There are travel regulations. There's the, as I mentioned, the proposal and award policy and procedures guide, the PAP guide. NSF also has, the policy office has training and other tools on a resource page. And then things that are not listed on this page, you can always reach out to your program officer, to your grants officer, to the grant accountant in our Division of Financial Management. If you're a PI or co-PI, you should be able to reach out to your SRO or your authorized organization reps, your AORs. You can look at the award notices. You can look at the solicitation or announcement. There are a lot of things out there that you should be looking at and referring to get information about the award and how to handle your awards. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. Some recipient responsibilities, keys to success. The first one here is is really important, and that is comply with basically everything. Comply with your federal regulations, comply with the terms and conditions of the award, comply with the PAP guide or the uniform guidance, which are the federal regulations, comply with any of the solicitation or announcement special requirements. Again, there's the next point there is adhere to the terms and conditions of the award, which are included as part of the award notices. The award notice, you would want to review that to see if there are any funding restrictions in terms of what you can and cannot use the funds for. There are special reporting requirements. There are also special terms and conditions that you should be looking at and following. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. Some more keys to success. You must always maintain an active PI on your awards. NSF gets lots of notices. Again, the PI left and the organization does not appoint a new PI for 6 months, 8 months, 3 months. Well, if there are any expenses that were incurred during that period of time where there wasn't an active PI, they could be questioned and could be denied via an audit finding. So again, you must always have an active PI. The other thing here, keys to success, is make sure that in terms of your funding and your expenses, that they are allowable, allocable, reasonable, and necessary. Comply with all of the project reporting requirements. Make sure that you get those report requirements or those reports submitted in a timely fashion, as I've already talked about earlier in the presentation. And then you want to document your policies and procedures. You want to make sure that those policies and procedures are written and are available for everybody to access and review, and if need be, get interpretation on. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. Some more keys to success. Training. Make sure that everybody is trained and that they know what their roles and responsibilities are and what they need to do. Be consistent, and when you're applying your policies, communication is, in my mind, the key to everything. This is really, when you get an award from the NSF, it is a collaborative effort between the NSF, your awardee organization, the PI, the co-PIs, the program officer, the grants officers, the accountants, the financial accountants. It's one big collaboration, one big partnership, and everybody should be communicating and talking to each other, especially when there are questions or issues. As a systems person, I frequently hear, we've been struggling with this for 2 months or 3 months, and we didn't know. Don't struggle for 2 or 3 months with questions or issues. Reach out to program officers, reach out to the help desk. There are lots of resources out there for you. The last thing that I will say, that even though it's not really on here, is document, document, document. And then when you think you've documented everything, document your documents. If you get audited, the auditors are going to want to know everything, and they're going to want to see your documents. They're going to want to see policies and procedures. They're going to want to see, everything that is in place and that you followed those documents. So again, that's my final piece of advice. And let's go ahead to the next slide, please. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. As you can see here, there is some contact information that you can contact the Division of Financial Management. You can contact the Division of Grants and Agreements. You can contact the Policy Office, although in general, the Policy Office is really not looking for award-specific contact. And by that, the Policy Office is really more interested in, we don't understand how participant support cost or cost sharing or some other thing actually works or how it's applied, as opposed to, we have this award and we have this situation, what should we do? You should also reach out and contact your sponsored research or sponsored projects office. They have, if you're a PI or co-PI, you should reach out to the help desk. You should reach out to the program officer. There are lots of resources out there. Please don't hesitate to contact us. As we say, ask early, ask often. We do not mind questions. We'd rather deal with the questions before a problem arises rather than after a problem arises. So with that, That ends the formal presentation, and we will now open this up for questions and try to answer your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I'd like to welcome our presenters back. We have been answering a lot of questions in the Q&A during this session, and I think what we do have some time for to answer questions, and really my approach for this in posing questions to you all is to kind of tease out the questions that we think will have the widest applicability to everybody who's here. So we likely won't get to all of those questions, and we can also put some links in the chat to some of our frequently asked questions, which we see here we get quite frequently. But Jeff ended by talking about contacting either your program officer or your grants officer. And so I thought it would be good to kind of just start with some communications kinds of questions. For example, what's the best way to speak to the grants officer at NSF or the program officer? And when do you reach out to either the grants officer or the program officer? And who should be reaching out to who? So I guess this question is kind of directed more to Liz and to Vanessa, but perhaps you can just talk about some of those scenarios when it would be good for the institution to reach out on specific award-related questions.
I can help with that. Generally, we get a lot of information. We get a lot of inquiries from the program officer. They usually come from a principal investigator. We start by sending them back to the sponsor program office because some of those questions are specific to that institution. But certainly, you can reach out to DGA. In DGA, we try to limit our responses and our interaction to the sponsored program officers because we're trying to understand why a PI may be coming directly to us. But if you have technical questions, any kind of science-related questions, and even in areas of cost, I think I saw a question about the changes of scope. Those usually go to the program officer, so that's where we will usually send them. But feel free to reach out to us and we will redirect you as needed, or we can answer directly. Thank you.
Liz, did you have anything to add to that one?
I would just say make sure that you document that you reached out and you asked specific questions, and that the program officer came back and said, that they came back and responded that you made a good faith effort to ask the question. And that the response back was positive. Because if the IG, if another kind of audit comes in and you got something completely out of left field that you're like, oh, I talked to them on the phone. If it's not on paper, it didn't happen in the government. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, so I'm going to try and go back and hit a number of questions by topic area. And I want to start with kind of where we began on project reporting. And there were a lot of questions that came in on project reporting. And some of this might be kind of reiterating what was said, but I think we want to be sure that everybody understands kind of when reports can be submitted. So I'm hoping, Jeff, you can talk a little bit more about when reports can first be submitted, when they're due, when they become overdue, and then after we kind of set that, again, I have some additional questions on project reporting.
Sure, I can handle that. Basically, what our system does is it takes the start date of the award and the end date of the award, and then it divides that period by 12 months or 12-month increments, and it creates all of those reporting requirements at the time that Vanessa and the grants officers approve those awards. Again, that's the whole idea of an annual project report, is it covers 12 months. You'd be surprised how many questions we get. Well, what's an annual project report? It's a 12-month report. So if you read the policy states that the annual progress reports are due at least 90 days prior to the end date of the current budget period. So if your start date of the award is January 1st, that makes the end date of the budget period December 31st. So those reports should really be coming in before October to be period between when it actually when you read the 90 days prior or the actual overdue date. We actually give you what amounts to a 90-day grace period to get that report submitted. When you look at the report requirements, the report requirement automatically sets up, you'll see that January 1st through December 31st period, the report can be submitted and prepared at any point in time during that 12-month period. So on January 2nd, if the PI wanted to or needed to, they could create and submit the project report. So anytime during the report period, it can be created and submitted. Policy states it should be in 90 days prior to, and the reason for that is to give the program officer time to review it and make sure that the progress and the information that they need is actually in that report. And if they need to, they can return it back to the PI so that the PI can make those adjustments and resubmit before the end of the budget period. And then one day after the budget period ends, it becomes overdue. So the whole process is to keep those reports from becoming overdue. So I think that answers the questions, I'm hoping.
Thanks, Jeff. I'd like to continue on project reporting for a little bit. So if there's a scenario where there is perhaps on a project, there's a long-term absence of a PI on a project, how would the sponsored research office go about getting that report submitted? How should they communicate with NSF about that, and how would they go ahead fulfilling that responsibility?
Yeah, if it is truly a long-term absence of the PI, there actually is a notification and request that you can come in and you can let us know that there is a long-term absence. The program officer and the grants officer should then be in contact with me and my team. And we have a way that we can actually take care of those project reports so that we mark them as not being required. Because again, if the PI is gone and there's no one doing any work on the project, we can basically suspend that project for a period of time. So the first step would be to do the notification and request and then reach out to your program officer.
Okay, and then you talked about this kind of spider web and links of not being able to do anything on an award or get another award if there are overdue reports. Does that only affect the PI or the co-PIs on that project, or does it impact everyone, any PI or co-PI at the institution?
At the moment, it is just strictly related to that award itself. So if I have a PI and two co-PIs, it just affects those three people. But where it can get tricky, as you said, Jeremy, the spider web effect is, so say the co-PI is a co-PI on a second award, and there are a PI and three other co-PIs on that award. All of those people would also be blocked because of that overdue project report on that first award. So it is mainly those three people, but it can affect other awards. And that is why it is so important to get those reports in and approved.
Okay, just a couple more project report questions before we move on. If you have an award that is a one-year award, are you responsible for an annual report and a final report, or is it just simply a final report?
It would just be the final. And again, as I mentioned in the presentation, it's really a final annual report. And yes, you would only have one report if it's a 12-month award. Well, two. You'd have the final project report and the public or project outcomes
Project
report. So
outcomes
you'd have
report.
to,
Right. Final question on project reporting is research administrators are looking to kind of have a cross-section of reports that are due for their institution. Is there a way for them to see that in NSF systems so that they can know when reports are due generally?
yes, research.gov has a reports dashboard. And depending on your permissions or your role at your institution, you do have access to that dashboard. As a PI or a co-PI, I can see all of my report requirements for the awards that I am associated with. At the SRO, SPO level, you can see all of the reports for all of the awards. So the information is out there. And again, as a best practice, my recommendation is that someone at the SRO or SPO should be responsible for checking that dashboard and following up with PIs whenever they see the project reports are either coming due or certainly overdue. They should be reaching out to those PIs and saying, where are these project reports? Because again, as I've mentioned, the last thing that you want is for those to become overdue.
Right. Let's move on to talking about the budget. The first question is really just looking. We talked a lot about budget periods earlier on in the presentation. So can you discuss what is a budget period and who determines that?
The budget period is basically, as I mentioned, it is more or less a 12-month period from the start date of the award. So whenever NSF issues our awards and our award notices, they include a start date. And basically the budget period is 1 month or 1 year from that start date.
Okay, and so I have a question here that's looking at the budget at the proposal stage. And the question is, if there is something in that budget that is unallowable, and it goes it's going through the review process, will the program officer reach out to the proposer, or will the grants officer reach out to the proposer to be able to fix that in some way prior to an award being made? And then why don't we answer that first, and then talk about we'll get on to unallowable costs in a little bit more detail.
Basically, yes, you can hear from either the program officer and or the grants officer. If the program officer finds it and they reach out to you, they can do it. And then additionally, Vanessa and grants officers, as they're doing a review, if the program officer missed something, the grants officer can also reach out to you about any questionable budget items.
And Vanessa, could you talk about what your process is if you were to see something in a budget that was unallowable prior to an award being made?
Yes, when we are reviewing the budget, we do go through each line item. And if I see something, I immediately reach out to the sponsored program officer. I usually CC the program and the PI as a courtesy for them to kind of help me understand what that item is. And if it's unallowable, they will be, we will request a revised budget just so we can document it in budget justification. If it's a really, really complicated question, we reach out to Liz's group, and we will consult with CAP or RAM about several, different types of really complicated costs. But usually that's our process. Is really simple. Thank you.
Great.
And Jeremy, I just want to add that NSF will make the best effort we can to catch unallowable costs, but ultimately it is the grantee's responsibility to make sure that they're following their guidelines and the uniform guidance and all the other things. So if we don't catch something, that does not mean that someone can't come in and disallow it after the fact.
Great, thanks for that clarification. We got a number of questions about rebudgeting. So I want to talk a little bit about rebudgeting authority. So can you clarify when approval is needed for budget changes, and then when instances when the awardee can make those changes without coming in and for request for approval. Vanessa, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I can start with that one. We have a prior approval matrix that is in the PAPG that would kind of guide the grantees, but overall, they have really broad rebudgeting authority. And this is a response I've heard from Jeff many times. As long as there is not a change in scope or an approved change in scope in place, then they can rebudget among unrestricted line items. If it's participant support, of course, that will require a submission to the program officer to look at those costs. And sometimes we don't see the participant support reallocations in DGA. So we will advise the program officer when we see the changes in scope. Sometimes they will put in that narrative that they are, planning on rebudgeting from participant costs. So we'll reach back out to the program officer, either reject that or have them, follow up with the PI and the grantee to clarify that cost. But yes, we do allow, our policy does allow a lot of leverage for for our grantees to rebudget. And they are rebudgeting in accordance with their established written institutional policy. Sometimes we do get a lot of questions about just really nuanced questions that sometimes when I get too many of them, I will call the SRO and say, okay, why are you asking us this? Or, why do you need us to specifically approve this? And we also have other notifications and requests that they can use for those really unusual situations, such as the other category where they will come in, we'll say, for instance, that they are establishing a new foreign sub-awardee. We will ask them to submit that, and then, they will submit a new sub-awardee request, but it requires additional work within NSF from the program officer to approve the foreign awardee costs or something like that. So there are instances that we are constantly having, conversations, which are welcome. So we really want you to reach out to us if you have any questions. Usually we can answer them with a one-line email. So thank you.
And I would also add that and we've mentioned it a couple of different times in the presentation, NSF doesn't really want to play referee between the PI and the SRO, SPO. So if the SPO tells the PI that they can't do something, the PI shouldn't be reaching out to to NSF saying, my SRO told me I can't do this. Can you, we don't get into the referee. It's based upon their policies and their procedures. So unless they're doing something that is against federal regulations or NSF policy, we're not going to play referee.
Thanks, Jeff. And thank you for those clarifications. So let's move now into some cost questions. We did get a lot of cost questions. And so we're not going to get to all of them, but I wanted to go through a number of them. In particular, we got a number of questions about participant support costs. So the first question is quite detailed, but it's basically saying if you budget a certain amount for supplies, for example, and you don't need all of that money for supplies, can you rebudget those participant support costs to help the other participants or to be distributed for supplies, for example, for other participants in that category?
My answer to that is if you're using it for other participants and it's in the participant support category, that's perfectly acceptable.
Okay. If you are a subrecipient on an award is requesting to move their participant support costs to another approved budget line, does the primary awardee need to have this approved by NSF before that can be done?
That is a great question because we really don't have a notification or request to do that. So it will be dependent on that subrecipient's agreement with their prime about what they're supposed to do. So, and if they can, they can reach out to the program because it is a participant support cost, which DGA does not really have a say in how they reallocate it, as far as, as far as what they can reallocate it to. So it'll probably be a conversation, a subsequent conversation with the program officer, because you really don't receive an award notice about reallocation of participant costs anyway. So that would be dependent on that agreement with that subrecipient and that awardee. So Liz, do you want to add more to that?
Yes, sorry. So I was just going to start by saying, again, sub-awardee monitoring and budgets are the prime's responsibility. If it affects the number of participants you're serving or the statement of work outcome, you need to come back to the program officer and maybe to the grants officer. In terms of performance and the budget of the sub-awardee, it is the prime's responsibility to monitor those. And so we usually do not get involved at that level unless it changes scope of work or number of participants served or, all of the other things.
Okay, we talked about rebudgeting authority. This is a little bit of a nuanced question on that rebudgeting authority, which is if you are adding a new budget item after the award has been made, but that line item was not in the original proposal, can they rebudget to a new line item that was not already in the original budget? And let's say for these purposes that this is not a change in scope.
I would say yes, because of their broad authority to rebudget. Like I said, as long as it's not changing the scope and as long as there's a bona fide need for that scope of the project. So I would say yes, as long as it's not affecting the other parts, because some people may have, they may have a line expense that they can kind of defer to that expense because it's more important for the project. So as long as it's not an unallowable cost as well. So.
And I would just add, like we've been saying throughout the presentation, document. The IG has really emphasized recently purchases made toward the end of the award to make it look like grantees are spending down the award. Oh, we have X number of dollars left. We should just buy all of the things. So if something breaks, if there's new technology out, whatever the case may be, that it's not changing your scope of work, please send an email to yourself, send an email to a coworker, to your sponsored research office. Hey, I'm going to buy this piece of equipment because I don't need this other one, or because this one broke, or what have you, so that you can show that it was necessary for the award and that you weren't just spending down money, especially at the end of the award.
Great. We got a number of questions about cost allowability of meals. So if you are providing meals at a NSF sponsored conference or workshop, when are they allowable and when are they unallowable?
I'm going to take this one.
Great.
Okay, Jeff's unmuted, so I wasn't sure. At conferences, if you are on travel, that is allowable. It is part of your per diem. Please make sure they're not going to, the most expensive steakhouse in the city. There's a certain amount that is reasonable. There's GSA rates for that. If you are not on travel, if you are in your home attending this conference today, you are having your regular workday within your regular, you're within your work area, within a certain amount of space. You're expected to provide your own food for that workday in a regular workday. So please continue to do that. This comes into reasonableness. As federal employees, we are always told it's the appearance of impropriety. So if you have seen a news article that says X university paid for whatever with your tax dollars, please keep in mind that they're your tax dollars. So, dinners with things that's an IRS, you can claim that as a business expense, but it is not necessarily a grantee expense. Anyone else have anything to add to that one?
I would just add that if you're paying for a meal for them to be at like a working lunch or a dinner or something that you are providing, you cannot provide the per diem too. So it's like a double dip. So I think I saw that question a lot about what we should provide. And I also saw just several questions about the meal. So, just handle those consistently and handle those, within the allowability realm. So, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, the only meals that should be provided are for participants. And please, again, document who is there, who is eating, what the per person cost of that meal was. But if you are the PI and you are providing participants meals, you should have your regular workday meal that you provide based on the salary that you are paid.
I saw a number of questions saying, well, we have this because our institution requires it. So if you have an instance where your institution, their policies are stricter than NSF's policies, that's a case where NSF is not going to get involved with your institution. You have to follow your institutional policies. We got a question about childcare expenses. Can you elaborate a little bit more on when childcare expenses might be allowable and when they are unallowable on an NSF award?
Thank you. We've been getting this question a lot. And there are some specific solicitations and dear colleague letters that will allow, because of like remote travel or something like that. But generally, childcare expenses are limited to a, like the sponsor providing like a concierge, and it's in the uniform guidance. I don't have it right in front of me, but it has to meet all of the conditions that this is something that they usually provide. They have something, most institutions do not provide childcare for their, for their employees. Most businesses don't. So, and I have to find it, Liz. I'm trying to. I'll probably have to look for it and put it in the chat, maybe. But yeah, we don't. There's no direct. It's very rare. I put it that way. There is no direct expense for childcare, but they will help you find, provide services to like a concierge. But that's something that we generally don't get into. And I've been disallowing a lot of those because the institution doesn't meet all of the requirements for the uniform guidance. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add some of these questions refer to your institution's policies because, like Jeremy said, they could be more specific, more strict, and have very specific answers for you here. When child care specifically, I think if it's included in your participant support line items where, they're doing a training, there's something going on where that's a benefit that's being provided that's allowable by your institution, that may be something that's allowable, but for employees and other things, I think that's an institution level question, as Vanessa said.
The other thing I would just mention is that it has to be above the regular cost of childcare. It can't be the whole childcare amount. It's something that is above the regular cost. Let's move into some questions about no cost extensions. First question is, what is the earliest that a no cost extension can be submitted?
I can handle that one. In most cases, it's 6 months before the end date of the award. And the reason for that was NSF originally at one point in time didn't have any limitations. And we had people that would get a 5-year award who within 3 months of that original 5-year award were coming in and asking for a 12-month no-cost extension. And it's sort of like, well, how do you know that you need an additional 12 months when you still have 4.5 years left on this project? So we have limited it in most cases to about 6 months before the end date.
Okay, and then when you are requesting a no-cost extension, and the reason is that you need more time, you need to add why the original scope was not completed within the time frame.
Yes, there should be information in the request to describe why you need the additional time, and it's that simple.
Thanks. So if you have, sticking with no cost extensions, a situation where you have money left on the project, on the award, you have money left on the award, but you've completed the project, can you submit a no cost extension and do additional work?
Not currently. Basically, what you would want to do is, if you needed to, again, it's about the original scope of the project and or any approved changes of scope. So again, if you've completed the project and you've done everything that you said you were going to do, either originally as part of the proposal or any approved changes of scope, then you cannot just simply, I've got money left, I want to spend it, I want to explore this. You would either need a change of scope or you would need to discuss with your program officer, but just in general, no, you would not be able to do a no cost extension in those cases.
Okay. Let's see, let's go back to talking about award transfers. So if you are an institution that is basically transferring award to another institution, will there be, once that transfer is complete, will there be a revised award notice to the original institution showing the final amount of the award? How does that, can you talk a little bit about how that works? How does NSF close out that award with the original institution?
That's me again. Currently, NSF is not sending out a revised like award amendment to the original awardee organization, letting them know that the transfer has been approved. We plan to do that in the future, but we've not gotten that done yet. You can or should be able to go out and at least check the notification and request when you submit the transfer. It should be out in research.gov as an item that you can track. When it gets approved, the status should update so that you should see that it has been approved, but we are currently not sending anything out to the original awardee. We do send out a notice to the new awardee, but not to the original.
Okay, throughout this presentation, we've said, contact your program officer, contact your grants officer. How would people know who to contact for a specific award?
It is listed on, if you go to the award amendments or the award notices, the contacts are listed there. There is a grants officer contact as well as a program officer contact. And if those people are no longer here, you would get directed to whoever is the new person.
Okay, another question is asking about, I guess, continuing grants and the timeline for when those funds are provided. This person is writing that the award document lists the amount for each fiscal year, but is unsure which fiscal year that is tied to.
The award notices include both the fiscal year as well as the amount that will be awarded. So it's there as part of the original award amendment 000. The increment schedule is spelled out and it does include the fiscal year. and the amount of funding that will be provided in that fiscal year. So it is there.
Great. Well, we are just about out of time, so I do want to thank you, Vanessa, Liz, and Jeff, for presenting and participating and answering questions today. I want to thank all of you for joining this session today and the sessions that we had yesterday and that we have the rest of the week. Take care, everyone. Thank you for participating, and then have a great day.